Good morning or good afternoon to those of you who are joining us from other parts of the country. Hello, my name is Sam Roberts. I am the Policy and Communications Manager at the Housing Assessment Resource Tools Project here at the University of British Columbia, and I will be your host slash MC today for the launch of the BC Public Lands Map. This event is being recorded and it will be shared with attendees by the end of the week, most likely just after the event. But before we get started, I do want to take a moment to recognize that today's presentation and the BC Public Lands Map is about land. This map displays information about lands administered by federal, provincial, and municipal governments, as well as other public entities. These lands encompass the traditional and ancestral territories of First Nations, stewarded for thousands of years, and who retain rights, interests, and relationships to these lands. Today, I am speaking from the unceded territories of the Musqueam on UBC's Point Grey campus. We are grateful to all of the Indigenous organizations who guided this research and who provided meaningful feedback that has informed it. We welcome the opportunity to continue engaging with First Nations on this work as we move forward. So, some information about this session. We will run a tight presentation of about an hour with lots of time for Q&A at the end. I encourage you to submit your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we will work through those questions at the end of the presentation. If you have any tech issues, please use the chat function and our dedicated support, Sarah, will respond to you. We worked really hard to put this together, so there will be a survey at the end of the event. Please take a moment to fill it out and let us know what you thought. And we've also taken great pains to make this webinar engaging for you. So 90 minutes in June before a statutory holiday is a very hard ask. I acknowledge that. And so we've got some interactive parts of today's webinar, which I am going to kick off now. So we have a pretty wide audience for this map. Let us know what sector you're coming from. I know we have folks from all over BC, many different parts of the country. Thank you all for being here. Looks like we've got lots of folks from the housing sector, different levels of government, a few interested public people, and we're happy for all of you to be here. I'm going to close the poll in 3, 2, 1. And there we go. So you can see we got a good mix. Really happy that all of you are here today. So thank you for that. Let's get to the agenda. So today I'm going to introduce our project and our speakers, and then I'm going to hand it over to them to talk about the BC Public Lands Map, how we made it, and demonstrate it for you live. After the demo, I'll host our 2 speakers for a fireside chat discussion about the map, its development and what's next, and then we'll turn it to you for Q&A. I want to take time to invite all of you to engage and ask questions. We have spent the last year building this map, and so we'd love to hear what you think and answer anything that comes up for you over the course of the event. At the end, I will make the map go live and share the link for everyone who is attending to see first. So a little bit about the project. For those of you that don't know HART, let me introduce us. The Housing Assessment Resource Tools Project is an award-winning research group at the University of British Columbia. We produce digital automation tools for government, nonprofit housing providers, and the public to understand housing needs in their communities and to meaningfully address it. While the BC Public Lands Map is our newest tool, we have a suite of free online tools that can be used to learn more about your communities. Our housing needs assessment tools produce automated housing needs reports based on income and affordable shelter costs. Our land assessment tools are still available for Edmonton and Whitehorse, and they are predecessors for this work. Our property acquisitions tools give governments policy tools to encourage big federal and provincial dollars to flow into the community through programs like the BC Rental Protection Fund and the Canada Rental Protection Fund. And finally, we have a lot of great research that identifies regulatory barriers to building housing and policy solutions. In our most recent impact report, we showed that our research has saved Canadian governments over $6 million in just a single year. Our housing needs assessment tools are used and cited by 73% of Canadian cities, coast to coast to coast, in every province and territory. We are also entirely grant funded, and we gratefully acknowledge CMHC for supporting this project through the demonstrations initiative. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our 2 speakers today. Dr. Craig Jones is the multi-award-winning Associate Director of the HART Project. He is one of the foremost experts on Canadian housing data, especially the census and the Canadian Housing Survey. He also specializes in transit-oriented development, displacement research, evictions data, and land data. Ian Parfit is HART's Land Assessment Research Coordinator and the driving force behind the data architecture that makes up the BC Public Lands Map. He is an experienced land data researcher who spent over 20 years teaching GIS and mapping in BC. He specializes in GIS analysis, GeoWeb application development, project management, cartography, and UAV remote sensing. Now I'm going to pass it over to Craig to get into the map.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam. And thank you everyone for being here. There's plenty of evidence to say that Canada needs more housing. The Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation has estimated that Canada needs to build 3.5 million more homes than will be built in order to restore affordability. The Parliamentary Budget Office projects that there will be 2.5 million housing units completed by 2035, but that an additional 690,000 units will be needed to bring vacancy rates back to historical averages. In light of these really large numbers, a recent Scotiabank report argued that effectively the train to housing affordability just through supply has left the station, and that Canada needs to double its non-market housing stock to deliver on needed affordability. Doubling the non-market housing stock in Canada would just bring us up to OECD averages. In order to achieve this, the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association argues that 24% of all new housing supply in Canada has to be non-market. And the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives estimates that an $18 billion investment would be needed to increase Canada's non-market housing stock by about 1 million units. So non-market housing is a key part of solving Canada's affordable housing crisis, and it's especially important for BC. In 2021, BC had the highest provincial rate of core housing need in Canada. CMHC estimates that BC needs 610,000 more homes than will be built by 2030 to restore affordability. And the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives estimates that BC needs 25,000 new non-market homes every single year. And that affordable housing is needed all across BC. So I want to turn to ask you all a question. Approximately how many new, affordable, and supportive homes did BC Housing complete last year? Is the answer A, 9,300, B, 2,900, C, 6,100, D, 4,500? So I'll give you a few seconds to continue answering the poll. And now I'll count down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And now the poll is going to close. And so the correct answer was 4,500, but I see that a slight majority of you answered 2,900, which is interesting. So in the 2024-2025 fiscal year, BC Housing completed more than 45 affordable and supportive units. And it's projected to complete another 4,500 units this fiscal year. This is a terrific result. It's an increase of 29% over previous years. But I think it does put into context that need for new affordable supply is significant. And so how does BC close the affordable housing supply gap? So high provincial deficits and limited fiscal capacity of municipalities means that there doesn't seem to be enough funding out there right now to meet the need. The cost of acquiring land for non-market housing is a significant barrier. And we know that access to low or no-cost land is essential. Partly because Build Canada Homes investment program requires that applicants have access to land when they apply for funding. And providing low to no cost land can make more projects viable and can make viable projects more affordable. Now, these are challenging economic times, and we have heard that low or no cost land still might not be enough to make a project pencil out, but it is a prerequisite. So we're really excited to share this work with you today, but I'm going to ask you one more question. So the question is, could you access data on publicly owned land in BC before the before the BC Public Lands Map. It's a simple yes/no question. I'm going to give everybody a few seconds to fill out the poll, and I'm going to start counting down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we'll close the poll now. And it's an even split, pretty much 50-50 down the board, yes and no. The correct answer is yes. In fact, these data on public land has been available for years in BC through Parcel Map BC and through IMAP BC. But in conducting research across the country, we found that often non-market housing providers didn't know where public land is located, didn't know how to find it, and therefore could only be reactive to requests for proposals when a level of government put land forward as potentially being available. What we seek to do is increase the opportunities for non-market housing on public land by breaking down the barriers that exist to accessing data on public land. The BC PLM focuses on identifying vacant and underutilized publicly owned land for non-market housing so that proactive site identification could allow for better outcomes. So now I'm going to hand over to Ian, who's going to get into the nuts and bolts of how we built the BC Public Lands Map.
Thank you very much, Craig, and it's wonderful to be here today. I was brought on by Hart last July, and so I've been living this project for the past year, and it's been quite a journey. We began with a foundation using a snapshot from the Land Title and Survey Authority's parcel map project for properties across the province. These data include a field that classifies ownership by general type, including federal, provincial, local government, and Crown agency ownership. We excluded private, First Nations, unknown, and mixed ownership classes. And we did not have access to the specific owner of any parcel, just these general classes. So that was our foundation. And then the next step was to add data from the BC Assessment Authority. So this organization does a lot of work to assess every parcel. So they have accumulate a lot of data about each parcel, including, of course, the address, the current use, and the land value and improvement value. So once this was attached to the parcels, we were able to exclude parcels currently occupied by schools, hospitals, parks, utilities, marinas, and other uses that were unsuitable for housing. We also removed small parcels less than 100 square meters in size, and long and thin parcels, and also large parcels over 50,000 square meters, because those large parcels would require a master planning process before building could occur. Then we moved on to looking at other forms of data. We accessed the Integrated Cadastral Information Society information about infrastructure, including hydro and electrical and water mains, and official community plans and zoning information where that existed. Next, we turned to a wide range of open data layers that came from the BC Data Catalog, federal agencies, and others to identify parcels with heritage values, with remediation history, what the flood and wildfire risk was, if they were within a riparian zone or had poor drainage. We used the Housing Infrastructure and Communities Canada Spatial Access Measures data to assess proximity to amenities such as education, healthcare, sports and arts facilities, employment, and grocery stores. And we also calculated the distance to roads, parks, and transit. And finally, we used the nativelands.ca data to identify the First Nations territories that the parcels are within. We built the prototype for Metro Vancouver, and once the data for this area was nearing completion, I handed it over to my colleague, Andrew Rigby, who then began to build the web mapping interface that you will use to explore the data below. And the development of that interface and the rest of the data kind of went hand in hand through the rest of the uh, development period. I used Python and R coding to automate the process in order to standardize the work and make it easier to update. Our goal was to provide province-wide consistent a process for selecting public lands and characterizing them with a wide range of data and then rating their suitability for housing. The goal was that the app would be as useful in Terrace as it is in Metro Vancouver. So moving on to challenges, I'm going to begin challenges with a challenge for you, which is a quiz. And the question that I want you to think about is how many total parcels of land are mapped in BC? Is the answer 2.2 million, 1.7 million, 3.1 million, or 4.1 million? I'll give you a few more seconds to answer that and then sort of count down 3, 2, 1, and close the poll. So the correct answer is 2.2 million. Second popular answer, most popular answer. A lot of people thought there was more, but these 2.2 million parcels comprise about 12% of the province. The rest is undifferent or untitled land. So yeah, 2.2 million parcels, that was our starting point. And just one of the biggest challenges really was working with such a large amount of data. For each of these parcels, as I mentioned, we assembled a lot of information, including the slope, which required the construction of a large digital elevation model. And so that was quite challenging. My computer was constantly running out of hard drive space and that kind of thing. The second challenge we faced was that the BC assessment data required that everything was done on the jurisdiction level. So I had to break it down into parts. We chose to use regional districts as our kind of data chunk to work with. That also helped address that scale, that data size issue I mentioned previously. And then finally, the third problem was that the equipment I was provided by UBC was slightly antiquated. Just joking. Actually, they've been very well resourced, excellent IT department here. And as I began to get overwhelmed by processing all of this data, we were able to access resources from the advanced research computing folks at UBC here, which really helped a lot. In terms of successes, the first success was really getting across the finish line. It was a bit of a photo finish. We're still working on a couple of details and have been working, it seems like a more frenetic pace as we get closer to the line. But it's really great to be here today with the project largely done. Now we have another quiz for you. And so this is about the result, if you like. How many parcels were identified in BC after we eliminated unsuitable ones? 68,600, 52,500, 39,200, or 24,900. So I'll give you a couple more seconds. 3, 2, 1. And looks like, yes, people had some quite correct on this one. 52,500 is the correct answer. And it's also coincidentally about the size of the capacity of BC Place Stadium, where the World Cup is happening, just here in Vancouver. Anyway, as well as completing, another success really was that we brought all this data together. Previous projects that HART has worked on that you might be familiar with in other cities had many of these layers, but not all of them. We also developed some new data sets ourselves. First of all, we had some interest in recent development activity that takes place around parcels. So we looked at all of the construction that had happened between 2020 and 2025 and used that to create a development intensity layer. And then secondly, we looked at a 1 kilometer radius around each parcel and identified the maximum and median dwelling density that has taken place in dissemination blocks in that area, and then assigned that to the parcel so you could get a sense of the most and kind of median types of building that were around that property. So now I'm going to hand you back to Craig to walk you through and introduce you to the web app itself.
Thanks so much, Ian. So, what is the BC Public Lands Map? Well, it's free and available to everyone. It's user-friendly and intuitive, and it's actually a lot of fun to navigate and just explore and find out where these parcels are located. It's a reliable source of information because ultimately everything we've included here is government-backed. And it's a valuable resource for governments, non-market housing providers, communities, and First Nations to conduct a high-level scan of all the vacant and underutilized lands in their communities and across BC. So let's get into the demonstration. What you're seeing here is the high-level summary of all of the publicly owned parcels in BC, which remain after the removal process that Ian talked about. There's a host of filters here on the left-hand side, and in the top right-hand side, you can see the number of parcels which are currently visible through filters. So if I were to filter for only parcels which are currently vacant and underutilized, you'll see that the number drops by about 5,000, indicating that there are about 5,000 publicly owned parcels which are neither vacant nor underutilized. At this high scale, we can take a look at the level of government which owns the land. So at the highest amount is under local government, and that can include municipalities, school districts, regional districts, any form of local government. And so within this province-wide frame, local government owns about 219 million square meters. The province under Crown Provincial has 119 million. Crown agencies have 16 million, and the federal government in BC has 7 million, whereas Untitled Provincial is so small that it doesn't really register. But the BC PLM is not designed to work just at the provincial scale. It's actually most useful when we dig into case studies. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to assume various perspectives of actors in a city, in a small town, and in a northern community in BC. So right off the start, let's just begin with the city of Vancouver. So I can go here into the select jurisdiction under the select municipality. I type in Van, the search automatically brings up the city of Vancouver and other Vancouver or Van fields. As I click on the city of Vancouver, the map automatically updates to filter out everything that is not in the city of Vancouver. Zooms right in on the geographical frame, the number of parcels decreases. So there's been a lot of work going on in Vancouver to increase the supply of housing. There's a lot of work going on right now in the Broadway corridor around, densification, tenant protection, tenant relocation. And I think the city, there are still significant challenges to achieving these goals. So I think this is a good first example to start with. I'm going to assume the perspective of a position of a non-market housing provider, and I want to expand my operation with a new project. Let's think about this. What do I know from my perspective? Well, I know that right now concrete construction is super expensive. And so what I want to do is to try to identify parcels which may be suitable for a low-rise wood frame building. And for that, I look to our development scenarios. So as Ian mentioned, he talked about it a bit, it's also in our methodology, that we have established 3 development scenarios. There is the current situation, which adding in the number of units in here would basically have no change to the density of a city block. There's the median neighborhood density, which would be consistent with the density in the immediate neighborhood. And then there's the highest neighborhood density, which scans with a declimeter for the highest density and then brings it back to apply to a parcel. So right now, I don't want to be too ambitious. I don't want to push the envelope too much. So I'll stick with a median neighborhood density development scenario. And then I'll click on the low-rise built form. And so that filters out, I go from almost 1,400 parcels that have potential down to 328. The next thing I want to do, now that I've got my development scenario chosen, I want to make sure that I am only looking at parcels which are currently vacant or underused. And that really does narrow things down again to 157 parcels. And as a non-market housing provider, I really want to do my best to fit in with existing programs like maybe BC Builds, Build Canada Homes potentially, but also a really important program that's happening here in BC is the Digitally Accelerated Standardized Housing program that's been led by BC Housing, by BC Builds, and other organizations. And so we've incorporated a handful of Dash compatibility criteria here so that users can work within the Dash filters. To start off with, Dash wants to work with large sites, at least 100 feet wide. So I will click that filter on, and that takes away that drops our parcels by quite a lot. I will note that there are some clusters of parcels which are removed. So maybe in the future I might want to return to those and look back. Okay, maybe there's some site assembly that could take place. It's very important under the Dash program that the land be relatively flat. So mean slope, the slope of the land should be less than 5 degrees. And it's very important for these projects to be very close to water mains and to the primary electrical grid. And after all this filtering, I've gone from 1,400 down to 14. I can now look at these parcels. But I noticed something. That basically through this filtering process, everything is concentrated near downtown Vancouver. And so that could be a bit of a challenge for me because I know that this land will be in higher demand, potentially more expensive. So I'm gonna change some of my assumptions here around the development scenario, and I'm going to go to the highest neighborhood density. So something that's very important with the way that this tool works is I have to unclick the low-rise filter in median neighborhood density before I can turn on the low-rise filter for the highest neighborhood density. And so in making this change, now I'm seeing some potential sites which are not all concentrated around downtown Vancouver. And you may have noticed that those sites we were seeing in downtown Vancouver aren't showing up anymore. Well, that's because under this development scenario, they're showing up as either high-rise or dense high-rise potential developments. So now I've got 24 parcels to explore. I think I'll just take a look at maybe the Grandview Woodlands area over here. I like the look of this parcel. It's half a city block in size. So let's click on it and find out some more information about it. So it has a BC Public Lands Map score of 77, which is on the higher side. This is a composite score that takes into account site characteristics, development potential, recent development activity in the area, and access to amenities. I can see that it's a large parcel, almost 6,000 square meters, have the address here. The owner type is local government. As I mentioned before, that doesn't necessarily mean the city. It could mean school district, regional government. Its current use is under transportation, utilities, and infrastructure. We see this as something of a catch-all current use that doesn't include commercial, industrial, or residential. But I do see that the zoning right now is under other residential. Right here, I have the information which is provided from nativeland.ca. And I can see that the improvement value, that what is built on this parcel relative to the land value is 0%, suggesting that this parcel is currently vacant. And the assessed land value is over $5 million. So this is a really interesting site. I'm going to use Google Maps just to click on and investigate what is happening on this site. And so what I can see here from Google Maps is that this is a really large surface level parking lot. And from this, maybe I want to proceed, maybe I don't, maybe I want to keep looking at the other parcels. But if I am interested, now I can go ahead and conduct a title search to find out exactly who owns this. I could look at local planning documents or official community plans to find out, okay, what's planned for this surface level parking lot. And maybe I could reach out to the owner and say, hey, maybe there's something that we could do here with this parcel. And so what this process has allowed me to do is to go down, is to start at a lot of parcels and narrow down to just 24, which I could then do some deeper dives on, figure out which ones are, obviously not viable, but those that would be worth further exploration. Let's just do a very high level just for a couple of minutes. Let's look at Penticton. And as we zoom in here to the city of Penticton, we're interested in Penticton um, because there's been a lot of Penticton's been in the news a lot around housing, encampments, small homes, just affordable housing in general. And at times it's appeared that this is somewhat contentious between um, the province and the municipality. And so, if we were to assume the perspective of maybe someone that works in the province who wants to know, okay, um, you know, is there any vacant land in Penticton that the province owns? So, if I were to then filter for the Crown provincial ownership type, we can see that it goes down to 15 parcels, and we can zoom around and look at some of these parcels, and we can see that apart from that one right there, which I believe is the law courts, many of these parcels are kind of oddly shaped in odd locations, overlapping with a road, and so not particularly viable looking. If I were then to change the ownership filter to for actually, let's look at Crown agencies and not local government, Crown agency, what's there, and that the provincial government, and also want to filter for the vacant land, which is just under the ownership here. And so I see here there's only 4 parcels. We can zoom in on some of those and just see, okay, uh, some of these parcels look, maybe this is viable, might be worth a bit more exploration. Um, but there's only 4 of them. And so it looks like if I were to check for, okay, well, what about federal government? The feds have any land in Penticton? No, the feds have 0 land in Penticton, and then we already know Untitled Provincial is very rare, so we're not going to have any of that either. And so what we see is that the local governments, the vacant parcels in Penticton are overwhelmingly under local government administration. Again, that doesn't mean the city. It can mean, the school district, the regional district, a whole bunch of other characteristics. And let's just really simplify this here, where let's say that I am looking to find locations that would be good for family housing, maybe particularly single moms. So I would go down to our access to amenities. I would zoom in on some parcels so I can actually see what's happening on the ground here. And I want to do 2 things first, actually. First, I want to look at the site suitability. I'm interested in parcels that are rectangular in shape. So I'll click on that one. And then also, I also know it can be a challenge to work with heritage sites. So I will remove any heritage filters. And then I'll go back to the amenities. So as a single mom, I want good access to employment. So I want to be close to an employment center. I want to be close to schools so that my kids can get to school easily. I'd like to be close to a grocery store to make meeting my needs pretty easy. And then also, ideally, some childcare facilities. So through that filtering process, I'm down to 28 potential parcels. And rather at this stage, look at all 28. What I'd rather do is I just want to look at the best. So I'm just going to go up to the parcel score at the top, and I'm just going to filter out the top parcels that have a score of 80 and above. And that really gets me down to just 5 parcels. If I zoom in, I can see that the ones just to the south in the middle of the map look okay, maybe a bit small, but I really like the look of the parcel to the north, which is a nice rectangle. So I'll click on that, get some information. It's almost 2,000 square meters under local government administration. Its current use is vacant commercial and industrial, and its current zoning is commercial. So that might pose something of a challenge when thinking about getting housing on there, because it would have to go through a rezoning process. I can see that the improvement value is 0% of land value, so it's sitting vacant, and the land value is somewhere between $1 and $5 million. If I want to then take a look at what's going on in this parcel, just using the Google map view here, and zoom right in on that parcel where the red pin is, I can see that it is a surface level parking lot right here. So maybe it's worth an exploration to do more due diligence here, engage with the level of local government which owns this, and to explore what's possible. Or maybe I just want to zoom right back out and expand my search to look for other parcels. So in this case, we're going to assume the perspective of an organization in northern BC, which wants to know more about, the presence and location of vacant land held by federal and provincial governments. In this case, we will look at the Hazelton region, and Hazelton is in the Kitimat-Stikine Regional District. And that's because we're using that because Hazelton is actually has within it Old Hazelton, New Hazelton, and South Hazelton. I am also I have a personal connection with Hazelton in that I have family there and I've gone to visit a few times. So as we zoom in to the Hazelton area, we see that there is quite a lot of publicly owned land. So first off, we want to filter for vacant parcels, because that's our frame. Doesn't really change a whole lot, right? If we go to vacant and underutilized, there's still a lot of vacant parcels. So for ownership, let's begin with provincial ownership. And we can see that most of these parcels are provincially owned. There's obviously a lot here, but we do need to look a bit more closely. So let's zoom in on the parcels here. And if you see this fabric, you'll see there are many provincially owned parcels which are close together. We actually see this in many northern and rural communities. What's happening here is that these are parcels which appear to have been created for future residential development. The majority of these parcels are in wooded areas. Let's click on one of them. So yeah, you can see that even though there is a road that goes by here, this is a provincially owned parcel which has been converted into a parcel which could be made available for residential development or vacant commercial or commercial industrial use. But right now, it is a wooded area. And so in order to develop on here, it would need to be serviced with infrastructure before it could be developed for housing. But I still think that when we take a look at this frame and see how many parcels there are, it's really interesting. What I'm curious about in this case, because there are so many of these parcels, is, do these have decent access to amenities? And this is where we get into a bit of an issue with when we're looking at more northern and rural settings, is that we find that our amenity data doesn't do such a great job in these contexts. So, for example, according to the spatial access measures data, not one single parcel in this frame has good access to a school. So, of course, there are schools in Hazelton. And so this suggests that either some of the Hazelton area schools are not represented in this data, or they're not easily accessible by walking or transit, and both can be true. We also find this true to be for lots of the different parts of the amenity data, such as, employment center is just over here, or grocery store coverage is just over here. So what we should do is, because we know that our amenity data is not great for this particular context, local knowledge matters a lot. And we have added in a fix for this kind of situation. So what I want to do now is let's just simplify this a bit, and let's take a look let's turn off the Crown Provincial because there's too much. Let's focus on just the vacant parcels which are owned by the federal government, of which there are 13 in the entire region, but in Hazelton, there are just 2. Let's take a look at this from Google Street View. So right now, or at least as of July of last year, this is currently a vacant lot, which is owned by the federal government, which seems to be used for parking. Because we know that the amenity, that high level amenity data isn't all that great, what we can do is we can actually run analysis on the local context using a tool, built-in tool called Business Analyst. So what I do is for these parcels, I'll drop a pin right in the middle of them. Around that pin, I'll set a buffer for 1, 3, and 5 kilometers. And then I can run a huge number of different demographic and economic insights. One I really like for this particular purpose is the what's in my neighborhood infographic. So this just takes a moment to populate. This is drawing from data from Environics. And so what we get is some simple demographic information around, median income is fairly high. Median household income is fairly high. Median age is a little bit on the older side, and there's not that many children per household in here. But more suitable for our perspectives is that from this frame, we see there actually is a grocery store nearby. There's a convenience store. There's a restaurant. There are 3 medical facilities nearby. There is a school and education facility nearby, and there's childcare service. So once we can actually zoom in on parcels of interest where we maybe have a sense that actually we want to dig in as to what's really close by here. This is an excellent tool for that purpose. So zooming back out to the whole province, it's pretty clear that there's a lot of potential out there. Highlighted just a few high-level examples, and there's a lot of work to be done to say exactly where the viable parcels are located. But that's what's so exciting about being able to put this tool in the hands of all of you in just a few minutes. I've talked a lot about what the BC Public Lands Map is, and now it's time to talk about what the BC Public Lands Map is not. And so it is not a replacement for due diligence. Users will need to access other resources such as BC Assessment, the Land Title Survey Authority, and Autoprop to really dig into site and ownership characteristics. Certified professionals will still need to be involved for rigorous site evaluations, and there are any number of reasons why a particular parcel might not be viable for development. This could range from covenants on title, regulatory restrictions on the use of land, such as crown land grants, to site-specific characteristics such as contamination or unsuitable subsurface soils. It's not possible for us to identify at this scale. BC Public Lands Map is not an exact predictor of development potential. Our yield estimates are based on 3 scenarios of density drawn from the 2021 Canadian Census. These estimates are conservative and do not account for zoning, official community plans, bylaws, as-of-right development, or other site-specific constraints. In many cases, we find that this approach underestimates the number of units which might be built, but will also overestimate in some cases. The BC Public Lands Map is not perfect. We're a small team with limited capacity. Right now, it's up to the level that we could take it with the data and resources we have. For example, we don't have the ability to verify every single public parcel in BC. We did our best to systematically remove non-viable parcels, but we didn't want to go too far because we didn't want to risk removing potentially viable parcels. So there will be sections of road, land under bridges, overpasses, embankments, parcels overlapping with water are all going to be in there. So don't worry when you see something strange. It's not necessarily a bug. It's more of a feature of the data. We've brought together province-wide data sets produced by various actors in all levels of government. And it may well be that your local knowledge of an area is not perfectly reflected in these large-scale data sets. There's a lot of information we would have liked to provide, but for a number of reasons, we just couldn't. So zoning and infrastructure data are not shared equally with the ICI Society by all municipalities. So we estimate that about a third of the parcels we've evaluated are missing some form of zoning and/or infrastructure data. And although we've been able to indicate where parcels have access to infrastructure, we do not know the existing capacity of that infrastructure. So we can say how close to the electrical grid a parcel is, but we couldn't say how many additional households the grid in that location could handle without upgrades. The BC Public Lands Map is not up to the minute. So both the Land Title Survey Authority and BC Assessment data, which are fundamental to the BC PLM, were pulled in January of 2026, So since then, it's entirely possible that a given parcel has either left public ownership or that new parcels have been acquired. It's also possible that construction has begun on a parcel which this tool identifies as vacant. So there's an inevitable lag between the vintage of the data and what is happening right now. And finally, rather obviously, given the recent failure, the BCPLM is not finished. We're still working on adding slope to 5 northern regional districts. There is a ton more data which we could include in the BC Public Lands Map when we can get access, if we can get access. And we would love to add more information on archaeological sites, infrastructure capacity, soil quality, and development potential according to official community plans. We will leverage this work to identify barriers to affordable housing on public land in BC, and there will be an update to the BC PLM in mid-July to complete the slopes that were missing in the north and to respond to user feedback which we have received.
But I want to ask y'all a couple questions, a few things to give people a sense of where we're at, where we're going, before we jump into the last part of the demo, and then we'll go to audience Q&A. I just want to kick off by asking you both about your favorite feature of the BCPLM and why our audience should use it.
Yeah, I think that my favorite feature, which I wasn't able to demonstrate, but our users will see, is that it really allows for this high level analysis. So we can go to 30,000 feet, and then we can also really dig into the individual parcel level. So it's that I've been looking at land data in BC and in other provinces for several years. And the functionality of this ability to zoom out, zoom in, do a deep dive, look at a whole community is just really great.
Yeah, and for myself, I really like those two layers that we added, the kind of construction intensity and development density layers, and we've got some quite interesting visualizations when we look at Vancouver or the province with that data. So that was kind of pretty interesting in my view.
Great. And what features do you wish we had, but we don't?
Hmm. Yeah, I would say that the holy grail for this kind of work is getting a better understanding of the infrastructure capacity. That was something we really did try to look into, to look at other data sets. We made a note of this in our methodology that we simply couldn't find a reliable source of infrastructure capacity that we could scale up to the whole province. We know how important that is. We've heard that there is work being conducted on this question throughout BC. So that's like one of the features that I really wish we could have added.
Yeah, and for me, I think just having consistent data everywhere would have been great. And I always kind of took it a bit personally when some parcels were missing data that we were unable to access, whether it's for infrastructure or the slope. So yeah, I'd like to see, really, it would be great to have good data for public land across the province, and in some areas that's missing.
Thanks, both. Ian, it sounds like this map was a huge undertaking. At least I know from watching you undertake it. How does the scale of this map and all of its features compare with other maps that you've worked on or other maps that you've seen?
Well, my background is in natural resources, so I did work on some big projects with forest data, and there's a lot of forest data in BC, as you could imagine. Um, but yeah, just in this case, because we were looking at so many different layers of information, and we wanted it so granular at that parcel level to be consistent, that was really quite a challenge. And yeah, and as I mentioned before, that digital elevation model takes quite a lot of computing power to crunch we're trying to get quite a high resolution there at 1 meters. So that's been a big ask of the technology and me.
Fair. Craig, who do you see using the map? Obviously, you've seen we have a lot of different folks here from a lot of different sectors. How do you see people using it? Who do you think should use it?
Yeah, I think my dream is that everyone uses this map who's interested in seeing a increase in the overall supply of non-market housing in BC. So yeah, the more people that make use of this tool, the better. So yeah, anyone who wants to get involved in more non-market housing, please make use of this tool.
And as far as this map is next, obviously the first thing is getting that demo completed so that people can see what smaller communities look like. But what is next for the map? Is there anything that is coming up? And you said it was not finished. Please elaborate.
Yeah, so we've got a few minor features to add and to tweak. The slope is something that we're looking at. What I think is really the one of the looking forward, the potential of the BC Public Lands Map is seeing where maybe a parcel is in a good location, but there are reasons why it can't move ahead. And so we do have another project coming up, which will get into some of the some of the barriers that might keep vacant land from being activated as for non-market housing. And also, I think that this access to this data and the way this data has been presented could stand as an example for other provinces and territories in the country to follow. We'd love to see this kind of tool be made available elsewhere.
Yeah, and
Ian?
I would love to see people start to use it. And I know that with your other projects in other cities, there were some stories of people finding parcels and then building housing on them. So really excited to see that happen with this data somewhere down the line. That would be really a true success for us and for the work that we did here.
Lovely. Okay, a question that we get a lot, and we've done a few prototype demonstrations for this, is can you do this anywhere else? Can you map the rest of Canada? What does that look like? What are the updates there? Now that you've completed the map, do you think that it is possible?
Yeah, I definitely. So having worked in many provinces and territories, it's absolutely possible. I think it's the access to the data on the public lands and the property characteristics, which is the real hurdle to overcome. Here in BC, we're really lucky to have Land Title Survey Authority and BC Assessment that manage a lot of that data. But in Ontario, there is Terranet and the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. We've worked with them before, and a barrier there is they're on a, Terranet's a private entity, and so there is a cost associated with getting access to that data, which is quite expensive. That's a barrier. In other provinces and territories, what we found was that it's more challenging to get access to a centralized database of public land parcels of all level of government. In other cases, we actually had to cobble it together from provincial data sets, federal data sets, local government data sets to bring that all together. Whereas here in BC, we just got a snapshot of everything and began working with that. It saved us a lot of time.
Okay, great. And what about the Heart team? What's next for the Heart team now that we've finally finished the map? What are we spending the rest of our summer doing other than putting our feet up for a week and a half?
Yeah, going on vacation next week. So what's next for us is our next project of figuring out, okay, what are some maybe hidden barriers to expanding the supply of housing, in Metro Vancouver. Looking for more opportunities to expand this mapping work. We learned a lot in this process. We learned a lot through this process that can apply to the rest of the country. Even though we had this focus on BC, many of the data sets that we drew from are applicable to the rest of the country, and so we can expand in that way.
I will now get to turn it over to audience questions, and I see we have a lot of questions. So I'll invite Ian back. Thanks so much. And I want to start here with we've already answered, will this be a national map? Can it be a national map? Here's a question that's kind of techie. Will it be possible to use the public land map data in our own GIS maps? I'm part of a research group looking at various indices in relation to housing locations, and it would be really helpful.
Yeah, so the short answer is no. The data license agreement that UBC Library has does restrict the sharing, and so we do have to keep a lot of this data behind a wall. And yet, as I mentioned before, the public land ownership data is out there. It is publicly available through Parcel Map BC and through IMAP BC, slightly different data set, but also publicly available. If you are connected with a university, it's entirely possible that through the Land Title Survey Authority or through the ICI Society, that university already has some kind of data sharing agreement to leverage that. I would be we're posting our methodology online very soon, which explains how we did this work. I'd also be happy to talk with you about the process in a few weeks.
Okay, great. Second question. Does the map include properties owned by BCTFA, which I Googled and is the BC Transportation Financing Authority, and were they reviewed for suitability of use?
So the way that the Parcel Map BC ownership criteria work is that it's really at a very high level of ownership. So it's I would assume that the BC TFA is a Crown agency. So if I were looking to find BC TFA lands, I would start with Crown agencies and go from there, and maybe start with some sites that I'm already aware of. This is really not designed to find land owned by any particular agency or particular ministry or particular group. It really is about just identifying land which is vacant and underused and in good locations. And that is also under public ownership. And once those parcels are identified that seem like they're worth further investigation, that's when we go into Land Title Survey Authority queries or Autoprop or other tools that exist.
Thanks, Craig. This question is related to the fact that we are 5 years from the horrible heat dome that we had here in the Lower Mainland. And this question asks, are there environmental factors available in the map related to things like fire risks or natural disasters?
So yes, we have built in a proximity to wildfire risk. So we were able to get access to a map which shows the relative wildfire risk across the province, and then we said, okay, well, from a parcel within, I think, 250 feet, 200 meters or so, what is the highest wildfire risk to that parcel, and then reported it for there. We also drew from a national flood susceptibility index and applied that to the parcels in BC. So we do have those layers involved. Regarding heat effects, we did look to several possible data sets, including the Climate Atlas and others, to get a sense of where specifically might we expect more high heat events. And unfortunately, we found that the resolution of those data sets wasn't really all that useful to get down to the level of the parcel. And so we do have wildfire risk, we have flood risk, but we do not have extreme heat risk. Oh, you're muted, Sam.
Thank you. You also mentioned an underutilized filter. What does that mean, and how is it built?
Yeah, absolutely. So in previous work, we've defined underutilized as the sort of the density or the size of a structure, whether it's like 3 stories or less. But because of access to the other data that we had, we decided to work with a comparison between the land value and the improvement value. The improvement value is what is built on a site. The structures there, they're on top. And so in cases where we found that the improvement value was less than 20% of the land value, we deemed that that was underutilized because it suggests that there's a development value gap which could be closed.
Okay. Ooh, this is a tricky one. Maybe Ian, you might be able to chime in here too. Is there any way of tracking when public land is sold and to whom? Are there plans to identify when land ownership changes, for example, from public to private?
That is a good question. And actually, one of the layers that comes with the BC assessment data is a sales layer. We didn't work with that, but going forward, we could use that to see if there have been any sales, or we could see what changes from one version to the next in terms of additions and losses, and try and find out possibly what happened to those sites. But I think that would be an interesting go forward, is to see how these sites change and over time.
Yeah, our plan is to work on annual updates because that's typically the BC assessment data is on an annual update schedule. And so when new data is available, we can return, get a new snapshot of the public ownership level data, and then merge those, rerun all of the scripted analyses that we built in, and then have that new information public, which then shows, okay, well, what's there. In case of like showing change from one time to the next, that's not really something we can show. As Ian mentioned, though, it is possible to take a look at a parcel, any of the parcels that we identify, and then pull from that pop-up window the parcel identification number, the PID. You can then take that, go to BC Assessment. You could even just do the street address. You enter that, and within the BC Assessment website, it'll show you whether or not a property has been sold within a 3-year period, and it'll tell you that. If it has, well, then you can go to the Land Title Survey Authority, use the PID to do a title search, and then it will give you. Then you can say, okay, well, how has ownership changed, and specifically from which organization has ownership gone to in the last transaction. So it is possible, but somewhat technical.
It sounds like the process of just identifying land before the BC Public Lands Map existed.
Yeah, to a certain degree, yes.
I think that we've answered this, but I'm not super techie, so I'll ask it again just in case. Will you have an API available?
Yeah, we got this question in another setting, and the answer is no. As I mentioned before, we are adhering to the data license, which is held by the UBC Library, and so giving full access to the data sets is not something we are at liberty to do.
Okay, here's one. What information was used to map First Nations territories, and were nations in agreement?
So we, for a few reasons, we excluded First Nations lands from the get-go. So First Nation lands are not mapped within the BC Public Lands Map. It was deemed that we thought it wasn't initially wasn't appropriate for us to do that. And what I'll say is that we have engaged in consultation with indigenous-led organizations to get their feedback. But we have not engaged directly with First Nations, individual First Nations. That is something we would be more than happy to explore, but we would have to be really careful to do it in a really good way.
Yeah, I might also just add on to that you are looking at 3/4 of the Heart team. And so fulsome engagement is something that is very extensive and requires a lot of people power. So as I've said, and as Craig has said, this project is not complete. It is never complete. It is always iterating. And so we really do invite folks to reach out to us, engage, and we're more than happy to talk to First Nations about not only how territories are identified. As we said, we use nativeland.ca. That is the source of where all of the territory information comes from. And we have not changed that at all. But we're more than happy to engage in conversations about what it might look like to use better sources, different sources, anything along those lines. Okay, this is a technical question that I might share my map just for demonstration. What is the different shades of green on the map indicate?
That is a great question. Very astute. So the different shades indicate our parcel scoring sort of scale out of 100. This is a technical question. I'm going to give a technical answer. What we did is we took all of the parcels and we scored them, and then we ran a histogram to show us where all of the parcels landed within a histogram, and we broke that into 5 categories because it turned out that that the vast majority of the parcels fell within 40 to 60 points. So that's like right in the middle. And it has, I know Sam's glazing over, sorry. And it had this nice normal distribution curve to it. And so what we're like, this is great. What we can do is most of the parcels here fit between 40 and 60. And then we get some between 60 and 80, some between 80 and 100. And so we could follow this like almost a standard deviation scoring mechanism here. And so basically to sum it down, the shade indicates which of the 5 categories from very high to very low a parcel falls into.
And so for those of you who have no idea what Craig is talking about, the levels of green are just the score of the parcel. And we worked not only as a team to come up with a methodology of scoring, but we also talked to a few development consultants about realities of building housing. And you can find our whole scoring matrix on our methodology, which will be linked to the website, which I'm going to post soon. And so that's the top level answer. Craig is always willing to provide the very detailed answer. Something that I don't think we spent a ton of time on, so I'll invite you to expand, is proximity to transit a current or planned layer. And maybe you could talk a little bit about how that works.
Sure, I'll let Ian handle that one to talk about where we got that transit layer from.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a federal transit layer, and it does seem to have most of the buses and train stops around the province. It may not be completely complete. And then we also included the transit-oriented areas, which have been identified by the province as being candidates for more density. So we included that as kind of another kind of like a zoning layer. With parcels that fall within those areas can be built quite densely up into the sky. So yes, we've included in those 2 ways, and really it's just the distance to the transit stop is just a straight line distance from the parcel. We didn't use a road network to fully estimate how long it might take to walk there or from your doorstep.
Yeah, that's right. And we did something similar for the pharmacies, just straight line distance to a pharmacy. But within the other amenities, the grocery stores, the employment centers, the childcare centers, we pulled that from that spatial access measures, which was built by Housing Infrastructure Communities Canada. And that does take what's called a network analysis. And it does show, okay, how long from this parcel is it going to take, by the road network to get to that amenity, either in distance or time. And then we converted that into, okay, well, this has good access or poor access.
Okay. And how often will this map be updated?
Yeah, so because the BC assessment data is updated on mostly an annual basis, we want to follow that update process. So as there's new information on the property characteristics in BC assessment, that's an ideal time for us to then run the update process with the new layer of public land. So we're looking at an annual update process.
Okay. And what are some of the export features of the map? I know we didn't get a chance to go over the report, but maybe you could talk a little bit about it.
Sure. Actually, Sam, do you want to just return to the map and just show the report export? So we looked at a handful of possibilities here about how we maybe could export information on these parcels. And what we settled on at this time is to just have it so that a pre-populated report can be generated and with a whole bunch of information on a site. And so someone could okay, I want to look into this site a little bit further. I'll just export that and save it for later. What we also have in the map interface part of the tool is the ability to add your own data. And so if this is something where you're interested in exporting a particular parcel geometrically, and you have access to a GIS software, specifically ArcGIS Online, there is a function here for you to add your own layer to then look at how your layer of interest interacts with these parcels. And it's really important to note that when you do that, the data you upload only stays in the browser. It doesn't come onto our servers at all. We don't get access. And so it's a safe way for you to look at, okay, hey, how does this particular parcel overlap with spatial data that I'm interested in?
Great. And so this map obviously displays a lot of information about a lot of land. What could be the next step toward providing affordable housing? Is there a plan for conducting regional housing studies?
So the whole idea about producing this tool is to get it out in front of as many users as possible. That way, we get a multitude of expertise, perspectives, energy to go out there and to identify parcels which might be suitable within, all of the various local contexts in British Columbia. I have heard that that there are actors, maybe some folks out there who would love to use this tool to take a look at a municipality or a region and just like, hey, let's just pull out what we think in from our experts as development experts. What do we think are really great sites that are currently sitting vacant, and so then highlight some of those as their potential. So I'd be really excited to see something like that happen. But really, our work here and what the vision was to democratize this data and to put it into the hands of as many interested people as possible.
Okay. And on kind of housing as a broader topic, every community in BC was required to complete a housing needs assessment report. Does the map include those numbers already presented within those individual reports?
No, the map doesn't include those numbers, but we did work to produce the housing needs report calculator on the HART website. And so if you're interested in getting the numbers and that's down to the what's called the census subdivision or the municipal level, you can go to another tab on our website, the BC Housing Need Report Calculator. You can go right there. You can download that all of that information around the number of units needed and then in the categories that are produced there. And then you can compare that, have that as a sort of a piece of information next to as you're navigating the map.
Great. And a kind of broader question. We talk a lot about non-market housing and affordable housing and in relation to this map. What does that mean and what kind of affordability are we talking about?
That's a really tough question for us to get into here. Um, so what I would say is that uh, it's just that access to land question. There's really nothing that we can provide that will help with, financing or construction costs or carrying costs or interest rates, right? That's really sort of outside of our control and frankly outside of our expertise. What we can hopefully do is to provide an expansive view of opportunities which are out there and to maybe stir some creative thinking about, hey, well, here's a parcel. It's in a great location. It's not being, particularly, it's not its current use isn't maybe not its highest and best. So maybe we can start advancing there, keeping in mind all of the other challenges that currently exist for building affordable housing in BC. Oh, you're muted.
Very fair, thank you. The development layer is really interesting. Could it be used to help municipalities understand their infrastructure needs as well as where there's infrastructure capacity for new projects?
So I would say that I think so there's a real distribution of municipalities, right? So like in a city like Vancouver, I expect that that city has a really good handle on needs, capacity, density, infrastructure, has a really good handle on that information. I think that what this could be used for maybe a smaller municipality that doesn't have like a dedicated housing planner. Perhaps this could be a useful first step in order to take a look at that high level. Okay, where do we already have density? Where is it that maybe we could add some on some vacant land? And in particular, where is it that we have that proximity to those amenities, that we're not too far away from water main, we're not too far away from the electrical grid? And that's where I could see some value being added there. Again, would love to be able to do more on that infrastructure capacity question. That's a future goal. We'll see if we can achieve it, or maybe someone else will achieve it, and we can incorporate that information in the future. That would be amazing.
Okay, so I recognize we've been here for a while. I have one last question for you, and I actually think that I'm going to be able to be the one to answer it. Um, when will the map be available to the public? And I'm very pleased to let you know in just a moment. So this wraps the BC Public Lands Map launch event. I want to extend big thank yous to Craig and Ian for their energy, to Sarah for all your spectacular support on the back end, to CMHC for funding the project, to all of the people and organizations that supported this work, specifically our advisory committee and the UBC Library. There are lots of ways that you can follow along with our work on social media and by signing up for our newsletter or feature updates for the map. The link is in the chat. I also want to say there on our webpage, there is a place to report bugs. So if something happens to you, like it happened to Craig today, tell us, let us know so that we can fix it. This project is absolutely enormous in scale, and so inevitably bugs will happen, but that's what we're here for. We're here to fix it and to support to make sure that it works for everybody. And it is with great pleasure that I now direct you to our website, hart.ubc.ca/BCPLM, where the BC Public Lands Map is now yours to explore. Thanks so much, everyone. I hope you have a really great day.